In this harsh stone age, a time of hunger and exposure, other tribes still subsist on raw meat and wild vegetables. You, however, are leading your people to feast on savory soup and roasted meat. Not only have they begun eating fragrant steamed rice, but they've also started using advanced weaponry that transcends the era. All because you brought advanced special operations skills back to this ancient era. In your previous life, you were an elite special forces soldier. While apprehending a criminal on the border, you had the misfortune of falling off a cliff. When you opened your eyes again, you found several women dressed in animal hides standing before you. However, the searing pain from your foot left you no time for contemplation. Drawing on your years of special forces survival experience, you quickly deduced the wound on your foot was from a snake bite. So you picked up a nearby stone knife and sliced the wound open. Then you pressed a red, hot branch into the wound to cauterize it. After letting out a piercing scream, you collapsed onto the ground, utterly spent. Your only hope was that the intense heat would denature the proteins in the snake venom. After a harrowing night hovering between life and death, you miraculously pulled through the next day. You took a piece of dried meat from one of the women and ravenously devoured it. After finishing, you gestured frantically, asking for more. The woman's answer, of course, was no. After all, in this small tribe of just over 50 people, the daily food supply was finite. Furthermore, it was the season for stockpiling food for the winter, so rations were prioritized for the able-bodied adults. Seeing the situation, you realized you had to find a way to feed yourself. As the weather grew colder each day, it became imperative to find a way to store food for the winter. After some careful thought, you concluded that the most accessible source of meat was fish. There was a small river less than a kilometer away. However, the people of this tribe did not eat fish, and consequently, they had no tools for catching them. With this in mind, your only option was to gather some vines, weave a basket, and try to catch fish yourself. Before long, you returned to the mouth of the cave with a large bundle of vines and began to weave a basket. A few of the tribe's children gathered around, watching you with curiosity, making unintelligible sounds. Nearby, several women were drying thatch in the sun. Just then, a cry of terror suddenly echoed from the distance. The bearded chief and two other men came into view, each clutching a massive bird's egg, yelling in panic as they ran. Their cries were accompanied by piercing shrieks as a terror bird, standing over 3 meters tall, chased closely behind the chief. You immediately shout out, "Drop the egg." Unfortunately, no one could understand. The chief wouldn't let go of the bird egg, and the terror bird wouldn't let go of the chief. In just a moment, the terror bird caught up to the chief and delivered a vicious peck, killing him on the spot. Seeing this, the two adults who had run back with him quickly threw down their eggs, turned, and ran to the edge of the jungle to climb a tree, barely escaping with their lives. The young companions around you, having never witnessed such a terrifying scene, immediately began to scream in fear. Having lost its target, the terror bird instantly changed direction and charged towards the wailing children near the cave. Seeing this, you quickly ushered a few of the children into the cave to hide. A woman inside the cave quickly pushed a large, round stone into place, securely blocking the entrance. Unable to enter the cave, the terror bird turned and walked over to the chief's body, where it began to feed. Gritting your teeth, you decide you cannot let the terror bird escape. It has now tasted human flesh and knows the location of your tribe. If it gets away, the tribe will never know peace again. But with no weapons at hand, a direct confrontation is out of the question. Just then, you notice the terror bird's 2 long legs, and an idea strikes you. You immediately set about preparing. First, you find 2 fist-sized stones, Then you untie the snakeskin wrapped around your waist and fasten a stone to each end. Once it's made, you take your simple bolas and slip out through a crack in the cave entrance. The people in the cave are stunned. They want to rush out and pull you back, but fear luring the terror bird towards them. All they can do is watch anxiously from the sidelines. You move forward stealthily, crouching low behind the bushes. The terror bird is still engrossed in its meal, completely unaware that you have it in your sights. Quietly, you rise to your feet. Grabbing the middle of the snakeskin rope, you begin to spin the bolas rapidly. The two stones swing out, and centrifugal force instantly pulls the rope taut. The terror bird notices the movement, lifts its head, and with a piercing shriek, it charges straight for you. As it draws nearer, the woman and children at the mouth of the cave scream in terror. But you remain perfectly still, steady as a rock. Just as the terror bird closes to within 30 meters, you forcefully hurl the bolas towards it. The spinning bolas flies through the air, and upon contact with the terror bird's long legs, it instantly wraps tight. The terror bird, now only 10 meters away, loses its balance and tumbles to the ground. It flails its small wings, but cannot get back to its feet. At the cave entrance, the woman and the children are utterly stunned, their mouths agape, unable to believe what they just saw. You immediately call over two of the others to hold down the terror bird's neck, while you lift a large rock and bring it smashing down. Blood splatters from the terror bird's head. Its body ceases to struggle violently, and then it goes completely still. The two young companions looked at you, their eyes filled with awe. You untied the snakeskin from the moa's leg and fastened it around your waist again. Then you motioned for the two of them to help you carry the moa back to the cave. The two were now very obedient, looking just like devoted followers. The three of you then worked together, dragging the moa by its legs towards the cave. Seeing the three of you return with such a massive prize, the people in the cave could no longer stay put. With excited cries, they moved the great boulder and rushed out to help. In the distance, the two adult men who had been hiding in the trees also came down. They had witnessed the entire process of you hunting the moa alone and were deeply impressed. This was the first time in their tribe's history that such a large animal had been captured. Back in the cave, you told the women to leave the feathers for you and to handle the rest themselves. Now that the danger had passed, you had to continue weaving your baskets. About an hour later, the two large baskets were finished. You filled a basket with some of the moa's entrails and headed towards the river. On the way, a woman saw you going to the river alone and followed. In her mind, she believed you were very capable, so she felt she had to keep a close watch on you. Meanwhile, the two boys who had just accepted you as their leader saw you heading out with another strange object and immediately ran after you. The group of 4 soon arrived at the riverbank. Standing on the bank, you first observed carefully for a while, but the more you looked, the more alarmed you became. In just a few short minutes, you witnessed several instances of large fish devouring smaller ones. There were actually carnivorous fish in this river, but you had to admit, the ecosystem here was truly excellent. The river water was so clear you could see straight to the bottom, and it was teeming with fish. Having chosen a spot, you gripped the grass rope on the basket and lowered it into the river. The scent of the meat quickly spread through the water, agitating all the fish within a 20-meter radius. They swiftly swam towards you, swarming into the basket to fight over the entrails. You suddenly yanked the basket out of the water. Aside from those that escaped, 4 large fish remained inside. The fish in the river, far from fleeing, swarmed below, still fighting for the entrails. For a moment, it felt like you were feeding koi in a park. The 2 young companions and the adult woman were astonished. By putting that strange object in the water and pulling it up, one could catch those legless things from the river, but they still didn't understand why. You tipped the 4 fish onto the ground, cleaned them carefully, then sliced off a piece of raw fish and put it in your mouth to eat. Watching you chew the raw fish, they immediately understood that this was something edible. So they copied you, cutting off a slice and putting it in their mouths to eat. The woman's eyes instantly brightened, as she immediately realized this was a new source of food. Babbling and gesturing, she asked you to teach her how to catch fish. However, you didn't have her do that. Instead, you tasked her and one child with gutting the fish, while another child strung the cleaned fish on a wooden stick with grass, ready to be carried back to the tribe. Meanwhile, you continued to scoop up the fish. With all the fish now gathered together, you simply squatted on the bank and scooped them up with a basket. Each attempt brought in a considerable haul. The 4 of them worked like this for the whole afternoon, ultimately catching more than 200 fish. The largest of them weighed around 5 kilograms. It was clearly too much for the 3 of them to carry back, so one of the children was sent to fetch some older kids for help. Finally, with some shouldering loads on poles and others carrying them, the large party made their way back towards the cave in a grand procession. By this time, the gathering and hunting parties had already returned. Lacking proper tools, the adults' hunt had mostly yielded small animals like rabbits and pheasants. Just then, the children returned to the cave carrying the fish, all clamoring excitedly to show off their day's harvest to the adults. The adults had been grieving the chief's death, but their spirits lifted the moment they saw your harvest. The tragedy of their leader was instantly cast aside. After preparing the day's catch, all the tribe members gathered in the clearing before the cave entrance. A large pyre of firewood was built, and the chief's body was placed upon it. An old man, wearing 2 ram's horns on his head, set the pyre ablaze. The roaring flames quickly engulfed the chief's body. The firelight flickered across everyone's faces. The smell of burning flesh made the children's mouths water. They felt not a trace of sorrow. The adults, too, had calm expressions on their faces, reassured by the new source of food. Meanwhile, you took the opportunity to observe the tribe. The tribe currently numbered 52 people, 8 adult men, 15 adult women, and the rest were children of varying ages. The one who had just lit the fire was the tribe's elder. Being the oldest, he was recognized by the tribe as the wisest among them. However, he might soon be relegated to second place, as you were beginning to supplant him in the minds of the people. There was also a man with 6 fingers, whose weapon of choice was a wooden club. Likely a result of inbreeding, he seemed somewhat dim-witted. Beside 6 fingers stood a man wearing a feather necklace. This one looked quite sharp, and, like 6 finger, favored a wooden club as his weapon. Behind the man with the feather necklace was Stone, adorned with a bone necklace. His weapons of choice were, fittingly, stones. Standing a short distance away was a 15-year-old youth. He had only his right ear and 4 scars across his left cheek. His weapon was a bone fork, honed from a straight thigh bone. Beside one ear was 17-year-old Beast Tooth. His father was the chief of the generation before last, and in his hands he wielded 2 saber-toothed tiger fangs, each over a foot in length. Then there was Dolly, the tallest and strongest man in the tribe. His weapon was simple and brutal, a large thigh bone. The last of the men was Lumpy, who carried a wooden staff. He now accompanied the gathering party daily, tasked with clearing paths and standing guard. He also enjoyed grinding stone tools. It was said that his greatest ambition was to fashion a stone basin within his lifetime. Generally speaking, One Ear and Dalai were considered the most formidable warriors in the tribe. By the time the chief's cremation was over, the sky had grown completely dark. Led by the elder, everyone gathered inside the cave to begin distributing the food. Since no one had eaten fish before, an exception was made, and you were asked to distribute it. You took a fish that had been cooked earlier and demonstrated to them how to eat it and remove the bones. Everyone mimicked your actions and ate with great enjoyment. Perhaps because it was the first time they had ever felt truly full, the tribe members grew happier and happier, eventually breaking into dance as they ate. The scene unfolding before your eyes suddenly filled you with a sense of home. You silently vowed to yourself that you would lead the tribe to a better life. After everyone finished eating, the elder, who wore ram horns, took a charcoal stick and drew the scene of you catching fish by the river on the rock wall. Meanwhile, you were teaching the women how to weave baskets. By adding 2 grass ropes, you modified them into pack baskets so they would no longer need to use animal hides to carry fruit, thus improving their gathering efficiency. A few of the women fell in love with them at first sight, taking turns trying them on, reluctant to put them down. In the end, they agreed to gather more vines the next day to make their own. To express their gratitude, they picked out 2 deerskins from the gathering party's collection and gave them to you. From that day on, you became the first child in the tribe to wear clothing made of animal hide. However, you accepted it without ceremony, keeping one hide for yourself and giving the other to the mothers of several toddlers, so they could make clothes for their own children. After all, young children have weak immune systems, and in a primitive society without any medical technology, even a simple cold and fever could claim a child's life. Therefore, it would be no exaggeration to say that this piece of deerskin was worth a life. You believed that if a day came when you needed their help, they would surely not be ungrateful. The next day, you woke up very early. After a simple routine of military exercises, you felt parched. But looking at the stone basin of water shared by everyone, you just couldn't bring yourself to drink from it. It seemed it was time to fire some pottery to hold water. Soon, the other tribe members began to file out of the cave, but they weren't in a rush to go hunting today. The elder gathered all the men in the clearing at the mouth of the cave. It seemed it was time to choose a new chief. Thinking that only as chief could you command everyone, you decided to enter the selection process as well. The method for choosing a chief was simple and brutal. 2 men would duel unarmed, and the most powerful fighter would become the next leader. Before long, both Ear and Dalai had won their respective matches. You watched their matches and shook your head in resignation. They had no technique at all. It was just a pure contest of brute strength. Soon it was time for Ear and Dalai to face each other. Standing at 9 meters tall, Dalai looked like an iron tower. For a moment, Ear felt completely at a loss. But he did not hesitate. Instead, with a loud cry, he was the first to launch an attack. But unexpectedly, as soon as he reached Dolly, his shoulders were seized by Dolly's massive hands. Before he could even react, he was thrown several meters away by Dolly. With a heavy thud, he slammed onto the ground and couldn't get back up for a long while. Dolly pounded his chest in excitement as the tribespeople cheered loudly, showing their approval for the new leader. Just then, you strode up to him in a few short steps. "Don't forget about me." Seeing that a mere kid like you dared to challenge him, Dolly pounded his chest and let out a furious roar. But you showed no weakness, assuming a fighting stance right in front of Dolly. Dolly looked down at you, who barely reached his chest, his eyes filled with confidence and disdain. Meanwhile, the other children watching from the sidelines were cheering loudly, rooting for you. Without hesitation, you rushed toward Dolly, used his slightly bent thigh as a springboard to launch yourself upwards, and viciously slammed your knee into his chin. Before anyone could process what had happened, Dolly collapsed to the ground, rolling from side to side and groaning in pain. The tribespeople present were instantly left dumbfounded. After all, Dolly was their tribe's strongest warrior. Even if he were to lose, it shouldn't have been an instant knockout, especially against an opponent who was still just a child. The elder suddenly grew excited. An unsubstantiated yet powerful feeling washed over him. The entire tribe could become stronger than ever because of this child. Before he could give any instructions, you were already being lifted and tossed high into the air by the tribespeople, celebrating the arrival of their new leader. In just 2 short days, you had brought too many miracles to the tribe. In truth, this outcome was what everyone had been hoping for. Just then, Dolly recovered. Clearly unwilling to accept defeat, he lunged toward you amidst the crowd's gasps. Seeing this, you quickly flipped to your feet. As he closed in, you caught 2 of his fingers in a reverse grip, twisted them forward, and sidestepped behind him, delivering a sharp kick to the back of his knee. Dolly collapsed face first onto the ground. The more he struggled, the more intense the pain became. In less than 2 minutes, even a formidable man like Dolly was forced to beg for mercy, tears and snot streaming down his face. Only then did you dust off your hands and release the blubbering giant. You then turned and walked into the cave. At this, the crowd once again erupted into a lively clamor. The boisterous children cheered, celebrating the first time one of their own had defeated an adult. The women discussed where they might find more vines, planning to ask their new leader to teach them how to weave more baskets that evening. The elder, however, stared at the cave with a complex expression, his thoughts a mystery. At this very moment, you reappear before everyone with a brand new look. You are dressed in a simple deerskin garment, your long, dark hair tied back with a snakeskin strap, giving you a clean, crisp, and capable appearance. This new style is the result of your careful consideration. It is said this style dates back to the Shang and Zhou dynasties. Early farmers began tying up their hair as it was inconvenient for farming, and this became an important symbol of the agrarian Han people. Under the admiring gazes of your tribespeople, you walk into the crowd and begin to organize the day's work. First, you reorganize the personnel of the gathering team. The tribe now has a total of 15 adult women. 6 of them are heavily pregnant, leaving 9 others, including Liuzi, that makes 10 people. However, today you only dispatch 8 women for gathering. Now that they have baskets, they no longer need Liuzi to protect them. Each one carrying a stick for self-defense should be sufficient. The 6 pregnant women stay behind to watch the camp and look after the few 2- and 3-year-old toddlers. The older children are all sent to pull weeds. The remaining woman takes 2 boys to the river to catch fish. Now everyone has a job to do, but Liuzi has not been assigned a task, which makes him seem a bit dejected. For Liuzi, a man with the patience to spend a lifetime grinding a stone into a basin. You plan to put him in charge of firing pottery. However, firing pottery is not a simple matter. It requires a lot of preparation. Therefore, you must first assign him other tasks. The fish caught yesterday have not yet been air-dried. In this weather, without salt, they would quickly rot. After being smoked, however, they can be preserved for several years. So, you give Liuzi a quick demonstration and then leave the entire task to him. Meanwhile, you find a flat piece of ground in front of the cave and begin digging a pit to build a kiln. The entire kiln is divided into 3 levels, the bottom for removing ash and allowing airflow, the middle for adding firewood, and the top for placing the pottery. After a good 3 to 4 hours of work, the kiln is finally constructed. But a damp kiln cannot be used, so you call over the 2 companions from yesterday's fishing trip. You have them place firewood on each level and light it, so that the kiln should be ready for use by the afternoon. After assigning all the tasks, you head to the riverbank yourself to select clay. You find a large, smooth, flat river stone to use as a workbench. After slamming and kneading the excavated clay, the first small water jar, with a narrow base and wide mouth, is quickly completed. Following the same method, you proceed to make 4 more. You place all of them next to the cave to air, dry. Next comes several double-handled clay pots, dozens of ceramic bowls, and some smaller eating utensils. For these items, practicality is prioritized over aesthetics. At this point, you are still uncertain just how many of these items will survive the firing process to become finished pieces. When the afternoon was about halfway over, you placed all the semi-finished pieces into the kiln one by one. The two young companions and Liu Zai stood by, watching intently without blinking. The new chief had actually managed to make so many clay pots in a single day, but no one knew if they would be usable. You paid them no mind, sitting by the fire pit and adding plenty of firewood. And so it continued until dusk. The tribe members who had been out gradually returned to the settlement. The women's harvest was abundant. Their baskets were filled with wild fruits, along with large bundles of vines, apparently for weaving more baskets. The men also had a great harvest today, 2 large birds that looked much like turkeys, some bird eggs, and several groundhogs. Adding the more than 100 fish caught today, the entire tribe's haul was quite substantial. All the food that couldn't be eaten that day could be stored away. With several pregnant women close to giving birth, they too would have an ample supply of food. When the pottery bowls began to turn white, you stopped adding firewood, letting the flames inside die down naturally to cool overnight. The kiln could be opened the next morning. After a long day's work, the tribe members were tired, but as they gathered around the bonfire, every face wore a happy smile. They no longer had to go hungry. Most importantly, you had cooked the 2 large birds in the style of beggar's chicken, a delicacy they had never tasted before. You, however, had little appetite, because the food was seasoned with only a tiny amount of coarse salt and had almost no salty flavor. Coarse salt was very precious at this time. It was said to have been acquired through trade with other tribes. You secretly calculated in your mind, wondering if you could trade the pottery for more salt. After everyone had finished eating, the women returned to the cave to begin weaving baskets. They had discovered the baskets were indeed very useful. Today's gathering party was smaller, yet the harvest was greater. Meanwhile, you distributed all the animal hides, so now several children could huddle together under a blanket. Waking up the next morning, you immediately went to check the results of the pottery firing. Liu Zai immediately pulled the elder over, babbling something to him with a look of great tension. In truth, you were also very nervous. After all, your grand plan to trade for salt, and the meat broth you longed for, all depended on this. With the feeling of cracking open a golden egg, you lifted the earthen lid from the top of the kiln. Peeking your head over the top, you saw that all the pottery bowls had a vibrant, earthy red color and were unexpectedly smooth, as if they had been glazed. Seeing this, Liu Zai snatched one of the bowls and began stroking it up and down excitedly. He then stumbled back to the cave and returned a moment later, carrying a bowl of water and shouting joyfully, proudly showing the tribe this beautiful container that could hold water. You smiled and continued to take the pottery out. The 4 clay pots and 4 small water vats were fired successfully, their smooth surfaces showing not a single crack. Out of 8 spoons, only 2 were successfully made. The rest melted and fused together in the firing process. Of the more than 20 pottery bowls, only 12 were usable. As the reddish-brown pottery pieces emerged from the kiln one by one, they brought not only shock, but also excitement to the tribe. Beast Tooth and Big Hand were the quickest. Each grabbed a vat and ran to the river, returning moments later with 2 vats full of water. Though excited, the elder remained composed, and, through a combination of gestures and words, asked you how this was done. Before you could even speak, the 2 young companions who helped yesterday eagerly rushed to explain it to him. But your main concern was whether these could be traded for salt. You conveyed this question to the elder using gestures. Unexpectedly, the elder looked at you as if you were a spendthrift. Pointing to the various pottery pieces and then to the adults and children of the tribe, he explained in his native dialect just how precious these items were. When you finally understood, you were utterly astonished. Even a single bowl could be traded for an adolescent boy or two girls, let alone the large water vats and cooking pots. At this time, water carrying containers were exceedingly rare among the tribes. It was common for someone to spend a lifetime grinding a single stone basin. To obtain more containers, some tribes would not hesitate to trade their own people. They believed that more people were useless and would only consume more food. But you believed that more people could acquire more food and also increase the tribe's fighting strength. The addition of new members would also inject fresh blood into the tribe. With this in mind, you immediately assigned the trading mission. The elder and all 7 members of the hunting party set out, taking 1 water vat, 1 cooking pot, and 3 pottery bowls to trade for people and salt. The water vat was to be traded for 2 adult women, the cooking pot for 2 adolescent boys. All 3 pottery bowls were to be traded for salt. If there was no salt, the bowls were to be traded for girls instead. Once the instructions were given, the group set off immediately. Meanwhile, you proceeded to assign the day's work to the other tribe members. The trade was to be conducted with a tribe to the west. After crossing a mountain and a valley, the party soon arrived at their destination. This tribe was slightly larger than your Han tribe, with a population of about 80 to 90 people. The 2 tribes had often traded goods with each other in the past. Seeing that the elder and his party had brought goods for trade, the opposing tribe's bald leader immediately came out to greet them. After a brief conversation, the elder took a pottery bowl from a wicker basket and handed it to him. The bald leader's eyes lit up the moment he took the bowl. This pottery bowl was smooth both inside and out, and much lighter than his own tribe's stone basins. He immediately had 2 of his tribesmen fetch a small bag of salt rock and present it to the elder. But when the elder took the bag and glanced inside, he simply shook his head. "We require more. And this time, we also want to trade for 2 adult women." As he spoke, he had Dalai bring out a large water vat. The bald leader was immediately stunned. This basin was enormous. It could be used to store much more water. But in the next moment, he hesitated. Trading 2 women for such a large basin was certainly a good deal. However, it was currently the autumn food gathering season, and 1 less person meant a smaller harvest. But in the end, he smiled and agreed to the trade. After all, fewer people would mean less food consumed. This was a hugely profitable exchange. A short while later, 2 frail-looking women were brought forward. They were a pair of adult sisters. The older one was holding a little boy of about 4 in her arms. The little boy's eyes were closed and he was motionless. It was obvious he was sick. "We will trade these 2 for your large basin. You can have the little boy as well." The bald leader waved his hand with a look of disgust, seemingly urging the 2 women to hurry away. The elder looked at the 2 weak women but said nothing. He then had she 2 bring out the pottery pot he was carrying on his back, along with the remaining bowls. "If you want these," he offered, "you can trade the boy for them." Having just acquired the large vat, the bold leader, though he liked these smaller items, waved his hand to decline the offer. Seeing this, the elder had no choice but to use the method you taught him that morning, demonstrating on the spot how to cook a pot of meat stew in the pottery pot. Soon a rich, meaty aroma began to waft from the pot. The members of the other tribe immediately began to salivate. So it turned out meat could be eaten like this. The balding chief eagerly took the earthenware bowl from the elder's hands. Inside were several pieces of stewed meat and broth. The balding chief hesitated for a moment before taking a taste, and was instantly stunned. Good heavens! It was unbelievably delicious. The savory broth had a beautiful layer of oil floating on top, and a single bite of the tender, juicy stewed meat brought a feeling of complete satisfaction. It was just a few children, after all. The trade had to be made. The balding chief was finally generous, readily handing over the people. He then had a subordinate bring out a large bag of salt rocks, filling Dalai's baskets to the brim. Seeing this, the elder nodded in satisfaction. Subsequently, the large group began their journey back. The group that had arrived with 7 members became 16 on the return trip, with the addition of the 9 people they had acquired. This haul was far better than a full day's hunt. The group hurried on their way and finally returned to the Hand tribe just before dusk. However, as soon as the newly acquired people reached the open area at the cave entrance, they were all completely stunned. At the cave entrance were 4 water vats, 4 pots, and a large pile of bowls, all newly fired by Liu Zai that day. Liu Zai was looking at the pottery, grinning from ear to ear. This was the happiest day of his life. Meanwhile, in an open area on the other side, hundreds of large fish were hung up to air, dry. The women nearby were all smiling cheerfully. After all, this was all meat. Now they too could procure meat. The adults and children who had just been traded were especially dumbfounded. After all, a single earthenware basin could be traded for 2 adults. Yet this tribe, surprisingly, had so many of them. And all that hanging meat was surely edible. It seemed that coming to this tribe wasn't so bad after all. The elder brought the people to report to you. Several naked people, plus 1 naked child. Squinting your eyes, you walked past them one by one. Each one was painfully thin. A single glance revealed they were in poor shape. But that didn't matter. The tribe had plenty of meat. A single winter would be enough for them all to regain their strength. Finally, you walked up to the woman holding the child. The child was motionless, its face deeply flushed. You felt the child's forehead. It was as hot as a small furnace. You quickly pulled the woman into the cave. First, you found an animal hide to wrap the mother and child in, then had them sit by the fire pit for warmth. Meanwhile, you paced back and forth, fraught with anxiety. With no medicine available, how could you bring the fever down? Suddenly, an idea struck you. That's right, hay could reduce a fever with gua sha. With this in mind, you immediately began to prepare. First, you set a pot of clear fish broth to cook by the fire pit, then went to find a bone suitable for the scraping treatment. The beak of that terror bird was a full half-meter long. Breaking off a small piece would be sufficient. The woman holding the child didn't know what you intended to do. She had been frowning ever since you touched her baby, worried you might cast the child away. Tears began to stream down her face at the thought. Just then you approached her, holding a fragment of the bird's beak. "Give me the child, I can help save him." The woman didn't understand your words, but she could sense that you treated her better than the previous chieftain had. And so, with trepidation, she placed the child in your hands. Taking the bone fragment, you began to scrape red welts across the child's body. The lethargic child furrowed its brow in pain, letting out continuous whimpers. Before long, you returned the child, its body now covered in red marks, to its mother. You then ladled a bowl of fish broth and began feeding it to the child, 1 spoonful at a time. It was unclear how long the child had gone hungry, but it swallowed the broth as soon as it touched its lips. You immediately breathed a sigh of relief. If it could eat, there was still hope of saving it. As long as the child could break a sweat soon, its life would be saved. The woman, too, was finally able to put her worries to rest. Although she didn't understand what you had just done, it was clear you had no intention of harming her child. As soon as she relaxed, her stomach, which had been empty for 2 days, began to growl. She couldn't help but swallow as she gazed at the fish soup before her. You immediately ladled a bowl of fish soup, along with a large piece of fish, and handed it to her. Then you took the child from her arms, holding it close and wrapping it tightly in an animal hide. At this moment, your heart was heavy with worry. Even a simple fever could be fatal. The issue of food was temporarily resolved for everyone, but what about clothing? To accumulate as many hides as possible, they would have to hunt large animals. However, their current weapons were simply not up to the task. From now on, you would have to join the hunts to find materials for making better weapons. At the very least, you had to set up some traps. In your heart, you made a silent vow. Before winter arrived, you had to ensure that every single person had an item of clothing. By the time everyone had finished eating, the little boy had awakened, drenched in sweat. You handed him back to the woman and personally tied up his hair. You also gave him a name, Quabang. The woman was overjoyed. The new tribe's leader had not only saved her child, but had also personally tied his hair in the same style as everyone else. This signified that he had accepted her and her people. After taking care of these matters, you began crafting equipment for yourself. You selected a relatively straight stick and fastened a spearhead, sharpened from the leg bone of a terror bird, to one end. A primitive bone spear was thus created. Next, you took some of the terror bird's beaks and ground them into a short dagger. The remaining materials were given to Liu Zai, so that he could also craft a weapon. For now, there were only these 2 pieces of equipment. It seemed you had to fashion everything yourself. Early on the morning of the 3rd day, after the tribe members were all awake, you assigned new tasks. Liu Zai was to continue firing pottery. The first priority was ensuring everyone had a bowl. The adult women were split into 2 teams, one to gather wild fruits, the other to catch fish. The remaining children would stay behind to help with various chores. You personally lead the team, the entire hunting party, plus your 2 usual companions, Big Mouth and Monkey, and the 2 newly purchased brothers, Da Mao and Mao, form a group of 11. Facing the morning sun, you march resolutely into the jungle. Upon entering the jungle, the hunting party dispersed. Each adult hunted on their own. You, however, led 4 younger members. They carried wicker baskets on their backs and held a bundle of straw rope, acting as your assistants. Most of the trees in this forest were nut-bearing species, each one towering over 30 meters high. Gazing at the trees, with trunks over a meter in diameter, you felt completely powerless against them. The ground was littered with fallen nuts, and in the distance, you could see large birds foraging on the ground. But along the way, you only observed. You did not hunt any animals. As an excellent hunter, the first priority is to understand what prey your hunting grounds hold. Soon, you discovered the tracks of wild boars. From the jumbled footprints, it appeared to be a whole sounder. However, the depth of the footprints was genuinely frightening. It seemed to weigh over 500 kilograms. Proceeding with extreme caution, you finally crested the high ground of the ridge. Suddenly, your eyes lit up at the sight before you. In the valley ahead lay a small, shimmering creek. By the creek were some enormous aloe plants, and a dozen intelodonts were drinking at the water's edge. It appeared to be a complete family. The lead boar was estimated to weigh 750 kilograms, followed by his 3 sows and more than 10 piglets the size of domestic pigs. In this situation, a direct assault was out of the question. A trap had to be set. You quietly crept backward, keeping low to the ground, and returned to the forest. Your young companions were terrified. They had never seen prey this large. You hadn't counted on them anyway and began to set the trap by yourself. Using the straw rope, you fashioned several 6 snares over the boar tracks, tying the other end of each rope directly to a large tree. As soon as a boar's hoof stepped into a loop, the snare would automatically tighten, pulling even tighter the more it struggled. For safety, you had your companions climb up into the trees. Now, all that was left was to make the sounder turn back. You quietly circled around to the bushes on the other side of the creek, covered your body in mud, held up 2 branches, and suddenly leaped out from behind the brush. At the same time, you let out a tremendous shout. The sounder, having never seen such a creature, immediately bolted into the forest. You gave chase from behind, shouting as you ran. Before long, the mournful squeals of a wild boar echoed from up ahead. Upon reaching the trap area, you saw the leading boar and an adult so lying on the ground. These grass ropes wouldn't hold for long. You cautiously approached, bone spear in hand. Seizing the opportunity, you plunged the spear forcefully into its open mouth. The sharp bone spear pierced straight through the back of its neck, and boar's blood gushed out like a fountain. In a short while, the 1,500-pound behemoth finally collapsed to the ground, its body twitching intermittently. Only then did you let out a long sigh of relief. However, a new challenge soon presented itself. How could just 5 children possibly get such a massive wild boar back? Watching the sow struggling nearby, your eyes suddenly lit up with an idea. First, you secured the sow to a tree with grass ropes, then tied its snout shut to prevent it from biting. Next, you tied 2 separate ropes to the sow's front legs, and finally, you fastened the boar's rope to the sow's body. Once everything was done, you took the rope tied to the sow's snout and led the way, guiding its direction. Dazui and Huzai each took one of the sow's front leg ropes, walking on either side. Damao and Ermao walked at the very back with clubs, keeping watch. In this manner, they made their way through the dense jungle and finally saw the tribe's cave in the distance. One of the companions clearing bushes outside was the first to spot you. He called out in his young voice, alerting the rest of the tribe. Moments later, they all swarmed out to greet you. But none dared to come close. They had never seen such enormous prey before. You called over Liu Zai, telling him to prepare a water vat and some salt. When he brought the vat, you dug a hole in the ground and placed the vat inside, with its rim just slightly above the surface. Then everyone worked together to hold the sow down next to the vat, and you plunged a knife directly into its neck. The fresh blood sprayed into the vat without a single drop being spilled, and soon it was filled to the brim. You poured in a bowl of salt water and stirred it evenly. Before long, it would set into delicious blood curd. It would be used to make soup for the evening meal. The hides of the intelligents were stripped off to be made into leather boots or bags. These 2 pigs would yield a great deal. Beneath the hide, a layer of pure white leaf lard was a full 4 fingers thick. Later, it would be rendered over the fire. Everything left over was edible, except for the pig lungs which were taken for fishing bait. Even the larger bones were stripped clean, ready to be sharpened into weapons or other tools. The entire afternoon was spent processing these 2 massive, 1,000 gin pigs. It was exhausting, but the results were immensely gratifying. The smoking racks were laden with cuts of meat of all sizes, alongside a vat of cooked blood pudding and 3 vats of glistening white lard. The children giggled as they continuously picked at the pork cracklings, and even being ate with relish. That evening, just as Liu Zai was opening the kiln to retrieve the pottery, the main party returned from their day's work. The fishing team had caught several hundred fish. The hunting party's haul was equally impressive: 3 pheasants, 2 large snakes, over 10 bird eggs, a dozen or so marmots, and a basket of nuts. What was even more exciting was that Bing's maternal aunt, leading the gathering team, had discovered a new food source that day. It was an incredibly sweet tree root. When the outer skin was cut away, it revealed a natural, amber-colored sugar inside. If enough of it could be collected, it could be refined into white sugar. For this discovery, you made a point of praising the young woman. Everyone enjoyed their dinner that evening, but the elder wore a grim expression. Wielding a thorny vine covered in red spikes, he chased after Bing's aunt, striking her repeatedly. From the original owner's memories, you knew that vine was the tribe's tool for discipline, reserved for those who had committed serious transgressions. Seeing this, you hurriedly intercepted the furious elder and asked for his reason for the beating. He explained that the root was bait from a demon tree, and anyone who stole and ate it would be devoured by the tree. Upon hearing this, you immediately told everyone to stop eating the root. It wasn't that you truly believed his story, but you worried that the root might actually be poisonous or addictive. Because of this, you remained on high alert throughout the night, paying close attention to any changes in your own body. Fortunately, the night passed without incident. When dawn broke and the tribespeople emerged, you began to assign the day's work. Most assignments were the same as usual. The only difference was that Bing and his mother joined the fishing team. You, on the other hand, took 4 of your followers and joined the gathering team. You were going to see for yourself what this demon tree the elder spoke of was all about. The tree was located deep in the mountains behind the cave dwelling. There weren't many tall trees on this mountain, but the shrubbery was extremely dense. In addition, there were also a fair number of fruit trees. As you journey onward, you are delighted to discover the chili peppers you've been longing for. A patch of vibrant red is hidden amongst the bushes. However, your tribespeople have never eaten this. Its pungent flavor has led them to believe it's inedible. You immediately instruct 4 of your followers to do nothing else for the day, but focus on picking these chili peppers. You continue onward with the gathering party. After crossing a mountain ridge, a basin comes into view. Bluish animal skeletons are scattered everywhere, resembling a mass grave. And in the center of this basin stands a strange tree, towering at a height of about 60 meters. Its roots cover an area with a 500-meter radius, with the root nodules becoming more numerous closer to the center. This pattern seems to be designed to lure animals closer to the trunk. Your intuition tells you that the closer you get to the trunk, the more dangerous it will be. Nevertheless, you decide to approach for a closer look. Relying on your skills, you are confident you can retreat unscathed. With each step, you probe the ground ahead with your spear, slowly advancing toward the center. Just as your spear touches the ground covered by the tree's canopy, the intuition honed by years as a special forces soldier warns you of imminent danger. You quickly withdraw your spear and retreat along the same path. At that very moment, a whooshing sound suddenly cuts through the air from above. More than 10 spikes, each nearly a meter long, plunge straight into the ground, precisely where your spear had just touched. Each of these spikes is nearly a centimeter in diameter, and at its end is a white, bowl-sized flower. Aren't these natural arrows? You are suddenly overjoyed. The classic tale of borrowing arrows with straw boats suddenly springs to your mind. Using your back basket as a target, you tie a long rope to it and toss it under the canopy. In an instant, with a whoosh, it is pierced by more than 10 spikes. By repeating this process, you quickly gather 2 large bundles of spikes. As you leave, you instruct the women that the roots are edible, but they are only allowed to gather those on the periphery. On the way back to the tribe, you collect another 100 straight dried branches from the forest. These are demon tree saplings, about 3 centimeters thick and perfectly straight, making them the best material for spears. You call over the 4 followers who were gathering chili peppers. The 5 of them carried these small saplings home together. Back at the tribe, the children gathered around to see what you had brought back. But in the eyes of the pregnant women, the things you brought back were utterly useless. The chili peppers were inedible, the sticks weren't thick enough, and they couldn't even kill prey if they hit it. However, this did nothing to dampen your joyful mood. With the remaining time, you decided to properly upgrade your equipment. The peeled thorns were fine, textured and hard, about the thickness of a cigarette in diameter. If made into arrows, they would be heavy arrows. Although this would affect their range, their penetrating power would be formidable. As for the 3 centimeter thick saplings, their hard wood meant they could be carbonized on the surface and sharpened to a point, making them perfectly adequate for hunting. The task of sharpening the spearheads was naturally handed over to your 4 younger followers. In the future, everyone in the tribe would be equipped with this new type of spear. Now, all that was missing was a bow. Under the current conditions, only a longbow could be made. Though cumbersome, its power was by no means weak. Making a longbow required fir wood, which could be found in the forest where the wild boar was caught yesterday. All that was needed was to find a piece of suitable size. In truth, what you were most preoccupied with was the aloe vera discovered while hunting the wild boar. The fiber, its leaves, were the perfect material for making rope. It could also be used to weave cloth for clothing. While not as good as linen, it was far superior to animal hides and was also very durable. More importantly, the juice from its leaves could be used to treat wounds, as it possessed anti-inflammatory and detoxifying properties. At this thought, you decided to begin large-scale cultivation of aloe vera starting next year. By then, the tribe members would have clothes to wear, and the death rate from infections caused by hunting injuries could be greatly reduced. The next day, you returned to the forest where the wild boar had been caught. Fortunately, you discovered 2 fir trees that had been knocked down by some unknown animal. They had already air-dried, making them perfect for crafting a bow. After spending a full day preparing the stone tools, followed by another entire day of cutting and carving, the rough shape of a 1.5-meter longbow finally emerged. Another day of careful straightening and polishing was needed before it was finally complete. The bowstring was twisted from sisal fibers. The arrows were all fashioned from the readily available thorns, fletched with the blue-green plumage of a peacock-like bird. Over 200 were made in one go. 2 days later, you gathered all the tribe members in an open space. 30 meters away from you stood a straw target, upon which were hung several freshly caught marmots. First, you gave everyone a demonstration of throwing, hitting the target every time from a distance of 30 meters. Next came the demonstration of the close quarters spear thrust. The tribespeople watched with great excitement. It was only then that they realized the chief had been making weapons these past few days. You distributed 1 to every tribe member, except for the very young children, while the hunting party received 3 each. 2 were designated as javelins, with the remaining 1 for close quarters stabbing. The children approaching adulthood, in addition to weeding and playing, were now required to practice throwing daily. The white-shafted spears were beautiful, and the tribespeople grew incredibly fond of these standardized weapons. Besides throwing stones, this was their only other long-range weapon. Next, you demonstrated the bow and arrow. From a distance of about 100 paces, you fired 5 consecutive arrows, all hitting a groundhog. Everyone watched, dumbfounded. They all scrambled forward, eager to just get a touch. However, this was merely a demonstration. You had no plans to promote them yet, as their construction was still too difficult. Having successfully introduced the spear, you began to work on making leather boots. 2 black wild boar hides, after repeated curing, had become incredibly tough and resilient. To ensure everyone got a pair, with the exception of your own boots, which were made entirely of boar hide, all the tribespeople's boots had soles made from wild boar hide, while the uppers were stitched together from the pelts of various small animals. You personally crafted Quabang's boots. They reached up to his knees and were lined with fluffy animal fur, making them exceptionally warm. After putting them on, the little rascal showed them off to everyone every day. Your flurry of activity soon depleted the tribe's small supply of animal hides. As the weather grew colder, the need for animal hides became pressing. Now that pottery was plentiful, you assigned Liu Zai a new task, firing bricks. Once there were enough bricks, they could be used to build a larger kiln or even to construct walls and houses. The weeding task assigned to the young ones was also nearing completion. Dozens of acres of land outside the cave had been completely cleared. It was now suitable for either building houses or farming, but with no other appropriate seeds available, they could only plant chili peppers for now. Sisal is a perennial plant, so you plan to plant it on the back mountain, where it would only need to be harvested once a year. After arranging these long-term tasks, you prepared to venture further out in search of large herbivores. You had long since prepared all the necessary equipment for the journey ahead, including weapons, food, and various supplies. After instructing the tribespeople, you shouldered your basket and set off on your journey. The elder's face, however, was filled with worry about your journey. He had never seen anyone who could survive a night outside a cave. Herbivores are generally found on the grasslands. The first priority now is to get out of this boundless forest. After walking for an entire morning, the trees began to grow shorter. This made you very happy. It was a sign that you were about to leave the jungle. A morning of travel left your mouth dry, so you came to a riverbank to get some water. Just as you crouched down and took out your pottery bowl to scoop water, a behemoth suddenly shot out of the calm river, its cavernous, serrated maw snapping towards you. Terrified, you quickly rolled over as the monster's jaws clamped down on your back basket. The creature's mouth was wedged open by the basket. It couldn't spit it out, nor could it crush it, so it could only thrash its head back and forth. You were dragged into the water and tossed from side to side. In this moment of crisis, you struggled to pull the bird, beat dagger from your boot, and cut one of the basket's straps, finally managing to turn around with great effort. Clinging desperately to the remaining strap with one hand, you used the other to fiercely stab the dagger into the water monster's head. The monster's thrashing grew more violent, launching you high out of the water before slamming you back down, then dragging you chaotically through the river. You flipped over and mounted the monster's head, viciously stabbing its 2 eyes several times. Blood and brain matter immediately gushed from its eye sockets, muddying a large patch of the river. Gradually, the monster's struggles weakened, eventually becoming mere convulsions. Exhausted, you swam to the opposite bank. After you rested for a while, the creature finally died, floating on the surface with its pale white belly turned up. Your back basket was still firmly lodged in its mouth. You had no choice but to find a sturdy vine, thread it through the monster's eye sockets, and with immense effort, haul the creature ashore. Only then did you have time to examine the monster closely. It turned out to be just a crocodile, about 5 meters in length. After resting a while longer, you picked up a stone tool and began to knock out the large creature's teeth. There were more than 50 triangular teeth, each the size of a child's palm. Only after knocking them all out could you retrieve your basket. You checked the contents. Fortunately, the fire starting tube hadn't taken on water. The other items were slightly damaged, but still usable. But just as you were thinking about starting a fire to dry your clothes, the sound of footsteps suddenly came from the forest. Turning your head, You saw a deathly pale woman with a little girl staring at you in terror. The two of them immediately let out a scream and ran, dropping a round object on the ground. You walked over to find that it was, surprisingly, a wooden bucket. It had been made by hollowing out the center of a single log with fire. It seemed the two women had come to fetch water, but had now dropped their bucket and fled. Perhaps they would soon return with others. Sure enough, after a short while, the woman who had been fetching water returned, bringing several of her tribespeople with her. They were clad in white animal hide robes, their skin as pale as if it had been dusted with powder. The group stared at the massive fish behind you, their expressions filled with alarm. A man who appeared to be their leader met your gaze and pointed to the wooden bucket nearby. You understood his meaning at once, lifting the wooden bucket with your spear and handing it to their leader. The leader took the bucket, muttering something unintelligible while pointing again to the massive fish behind you. Though you couldn't understand his words, you grasped his meaning from the gesture and promptly stepped aside, revealing the fish. The group immediately rushed forward and began to beat the massive fish furiously, while several of the women broke down, crying audibly. The leader smiled, thumped his chest with his fist, and then extended his fist toward you. You were baffled, but seeing the smile on his face, you guessed it was not a challenge to a fight. Hesitantly, you bumped your fist against his. The man burst into hearty laughter and gave you a warm embrace. He then began to communicate with you, speaking in his unintelligible tongue and using animated gestures. Even without a common language, communication was still possible through expressions and body language. You conveyed to him that you had come from the other side of the river and were searching for a horned animal. The man nodded in understanding and then conveyed that this very fish had eaten many people from his tribe. As a token of gratitude for killing the monster fish, he invited you to be a guest in their settlement. Seeing that evening was approaching, and considering your tribes were not far apart, you thought of the possibility of future trade and decided to accept his invitation. You gestured for them to carry the fish, signaling that it was edible. The man looked astonished. In their experience, they were the ones eaten by fish, not the other way around. Nevertheless, he agreed. Because the fish was so large, it had to be butchered and divided into smaller pieces before it could be moved. And so, you continued with the task. The silver fish skin, measuring 4 meters long and 3.5 meters wide, was smooth, elastic, and most importantly, waterproof. You decisively kept it. After the rest of the fish meat was cleaned, it was cut into several large chunks and carried away by the tribespeople. Their settlement was located within the forest. After walking less than 10 minutes, you came upon a massive, hollow tree. The space inside was approximately 100 square meters. While not large, it was enough for them to live in, as their population was quite small. There were only 14 adult men and women, and with the children, their total number was just 32. You came to call this tribe, living in the hollow of a tree, the tree tribe. Their skin was so pale because they lived their entire lives within the confines of this dark forest. Their elder points to the east, telling you that if you pass through the black forest in that direction, you will find a mountain that resembles a cloud in the sky. On that mountain lives an animal with 2 sharp horns, which runs as fast as the wind, and no one has ever been able to catch it. Based on his description, you surmise that it must be a type of large antelope. Chasing it would be futile, but you could set traps ahead of time. At this moment, you appear quite confident. However, neither Da Shu nor the tree elder hold out much hope for your success. Seeing the elder fall silent, Da Shu begins to recommend his own clothing to you. It is the pelt of a large rabbit, one exceeding 1/2 meter in length. Rabbits enjoy eating the moss and mushrooms found in the woods, and there are plenty of both in this black forest. Your eyes immediately light up. rabbits are an excellent resource. You see, rabbits are as prolific as mice. Litters of 5 or more are common, and the young reach sexual maturity at just 4 months, allowing them to breed, averaging 1 litter every 2 months. If you could bring back 2 adult pairs to domesticate, their numbers would swell to several hundred within a single year. By then, the entire tribe would no longer lack clothing, and rabbit meat would become an important source of food. That evening, after the meal, Dashu announces he is taking his tribesmen out to hunt and asks if you wish to join them. You are momentarily surprised, but since rabbits are nocturnal animals, hunting them at night is perfectly normal. And so, you accept his invitation. Upon reaching the destination, you refrain from acting, instead hiding quietly to one side to observe their method for catching rabbits. Dashu leads his men to first gather some mushrooms, which they place at the base of a black ironwood tree. The group then takes up hidden positions nearby. Before long, a plump rabbit hops into view. It cautiously surveys its surroundings, and detecting no disturbance, it slowly makes its way toward the mushrooms. At that very moment, Dashu and his group charge forward. Using branches thick with twigs, they swiftly corner the rabbit, trapping it. Only then do they kill it with a wooden stake. This is an encirclement hunt, and they even manage to capture the prey alive. The thought of trading with them instantly occurs to you. It would be perfect if they could help you catch rabbits. They then move to a new location and once again lay out mushrooms as bait. This time, you decide to demonstrate your own skills. You take out your longbow and draw an arrow from your quiver. Dashu stares in astonishment, having no idea what this contraption is. Just then, another rabbit cautiously emerges and approaches. While it is still over 10 meters away from the mushrooms, Dashu quickly tugs on your arm, signaling for you to get ready to charge with him. You ignore him, instead drawing the bow and nocking an arrow. With a swift swoosh, the arrow flies and pierces directly through the rabbit's neck. Dashu stares at your bow and arrow, his face a mask of utter bewilderment. Smiling, you hand him the longbow along with an arrow. You guide his hands, teaching him how to draw the bow, and fire another arrow at the rabbit on the ground. With a whoosh, the long arrow sinks halfway into its target. The people of the tree tribe gasp in amazement, their curiosity piqued by this incredible weapon. Seeing Dashu holding the bow and arrow, unable to put it down, you gift him a fletched arrow as a symbol of your newfound friendship. The rest of the hunt becomes a solo performance, as you take down more than a dozen rabbits in just half a night. This was a number they could scarcely have imagined. Normally, catching 3 or 4 in a single day was considered a great success. This also led the people of the tree tribe to speculate on the power of your own tribe. Upon returning, as you requested, the pelts from the hunt go to you, while the meat goes to the tree tribe. Naturally, they have no objections. By staying here a while longer, you are certain you can gather enough animal hides for your own tribe. The purpose of your journey would then be fulfilled. However, you wish to venture further, to truly explore this world. Furthermore, you are intrigued by the animal the tree elder mentioned. Perhaps capturing a few alive to pull carts back home would be a good idea. The next day at dawn, you replenish your food and tinder, then bid farewell to Dashu. You ask him to help you catch some live rabbits, feeding them grass and mushrooms each day, promising to trade other game for them upon your return. He is reluctant to see you leave. After all, with you here, their tribe would surely have an easier winter. But he knows you have more important things to do. After leaving the tree tribe, you cut branches and stick them in the ground as you walk, creating trail markers. After walking for 2 full days, you finally emerge from the dark forest. The view ahead suddenly opens up. Before you lies a vast, sweeping grassland. Only a few scattered trees can be seen. The tracks of herbivores have appeared on the ground. You take out your bow and arrow and carefully press forward. The scene before you makes you laugh out loud with joy. A herd of bluebuck, about the size of domestic donkeys, is peacefully grazing with their heads lowered. It would be no problem to take them back and use them as beasts of burden. The thought of capturing them alive instantly crosses your mind. However, one look at these bluebucks and it's clear they are not to be trifled with. You can tell just by the pair of sharp horns on their heads. If you were to approach rashly, the dozen or so of them would charge all at once, and your entire tribe would be attending your funeral. Upon closer observation, you discover that it is currently the animal's mating season. And in this herd of bluebucks, there is only one adult male. The others are 8 females and 8 calves. Seeing this, an idea immediately forms in your mind. If you can first control the male using the same method that worked on the terror birds, the others are sure to follow. You then carefully retreat to a safe distance and begin to craft a bola. Before long, you sneak back up, bola in hand. You quietly hide behind a shrub, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Soon enough, a good opportunity presents itself. You see the male bluebuck mounting a female, vocalizing happily. You quickly swing the bola, and spinning like a propeller, it flies towards the male and female pair. In an instant, it wraps around the hind legs of the 2 bluebucks. The male and female pair both shudder violently. With a thud, they fall to the ground, crying out continuously. Next, swinging a lasso like a cowboy, you swiftly cast the loop, securely snaring the horns of 2 entangled female bluebucks. The herd of bluebucks is instantly thrown into a commotion. They begin to scatter in a panic. After a short while, several bluebucks become firmly entangled with each other. They cry out while struggling. Seeing the situation, the remaining 2 females take the 8 calves and flee at full speed. You watch speechlessly as the 10 bluebucks escape, completely helpless to stop them. You have no choice but to tie the legs of all the remaining bluebucks with rope. Completely domesticating wild animals is very difficult, especially for a naturally aggressive species like the bluebuck.